No one ever expects that a single ordinary night can divide a life into before and after, but for Paul, that night would become the silent turning point that changed everything he thought he knew about strength, success, and love. Paul was young, handsome, and successful, the kind of man people admired from a distance and envied without knowing him. He had built his company from nothing, worked endless nights, sacrificed friendships, weekends, and even his own peace to become the businessman everyone praised. To the world, Paul looked untouchable, a man who had everything under control, a man protected by money, status, and confidence. But life has a way of reminding us that no success can protect the human body from fragility, and no ambition can shield the heart from fear. That night, the parking lot was almost empty, the air heavy and quiet, illuminated only by flickering streetlights that barely pushed the darkness away. Paul had just finished a long day, his mind still racing with meetings, numbers, and decisions that never seemed to end. He walked toward his car without suspicion, unaware that in a matter of seconds, his world would collapse into violence and silence. The attack came suddenly, brutally, without warning or mercy. Shadows moved fast, voices were harsh and cold, and before Paul could react, pain exploded through his body. He fought instinctively, but strength meant nothing against surprise and cruelty. The blows were relentless, the fear overwhelming, and the world spun as his body hit the cold concrete. In that moment, success meant nothing, money meant nothing, and pride disappeared completely. All that remained was pain, confusion, and the terrifying realization that he might not get back up. As the attackers vanished into the night, Paul lay there, bleeding and unconscious, alone in the silence of the parking lot. The same place he had crossed confidently just minutes before now felt endless and empty, like the space between life and death. No applause, no recognition, no business victory could help him now. He was just a wounded man, helpless, breathing shallowly, fading in and out of awareness. And then, when hope seemed completely absent, fate intervened in the quietest way possible. Megan was finishing a long shift at the hospital, exhaustion written across her face, her mind already thinking about rest. She took a different path that night, one she rarely used, cutting through the parking lot instead of the main entrance. It was a small decision, insignificant at first glance, but it would change two lives forever. She noticed him almost by accident, a figure on the ground that didn't belong there. At first, she hesitated, her heart pounding, unsure of what she was seeing. But the training, the instinct, and the compassion that defined her as a nurse took over immediately. Megan ran toward him, kneeling beside his broken body, her hands steady even as her heart raced. She checked his breathing, felt the weak pulse, and knew instantly how serious it was. Without wasting a second, she called for an ambulance, her voice calm but urgent, giving precise details as she stayed by his side. She spoke to him softly, even though he couldn't respond, reminding him to breathe, telling him he wasn't alone. In that moment, Paul was unconscious, but something deeper than awareness registered her presence. A warmth in the cold darkness, a voice cutting through fear. When the ambulance arrived, Megan didn't step back. She followed, riding with him, holding his hand as machines beeped and lights flashed above them. At the hospital where she worked, she refused to let him become just another patient number. She stayed close, monitored every detail, and advocated for him with a fierce dedication that went beyond professional duty. Days passed slowly, measured by heartbeats and cautious hope. Paul drifted between sleep and pain, memories fragmented, reality blurred. And every time his eyes fluttered open, even briefly, he saw her. Megan, with tired eyes but a gentle smile, speaking words of reassurance, adjusting his pillows, reminding him that healing takes time. When Paul finally woke fully, the first clear thing he recognized was her face. Confusion filled his mind, fear tightened his chest, but her calm presence grounded him. She explained what had happened, where he was, and that he was safe now. Safe, a word he had never associated with vulnerability before. As days turned into weeks, recovery became more than physical. Paul listened to Megan's voice during night shifts, learned her name, noticed the kindness in her small gestures, the way she treated every patient with dignity and patience. For the first time in his life, Paul wasn't admired for what he owned or achieved. He was cared for simply because he existed. And deep inside him, beneath the scars and bandages, something new began to grow. Gratitude turned into admiration. Admiration slowly transformed into something warmer, something deeper. He didn't know it yet, but the woman who had found him broken on the ground was about to teach him that love doesn't arrive with grand gestures or perfect timing. Sometimes, it arrives quietly, kneeling beside you in the darkest moment of your life, refusing to let you fade away. This was only the beginning of a story born from pain, compassion, and an unexpected connection that neither of them could have imagined that night. Paul had faced many challenges in his life, but nothing compared to the quiet battle that followed when his body survived. Yet his confidence lay shattered beneath the surface. Recovery was slow, painful, and humbling. Each movement reminded him that strength could be taken away in seconds, and independence was far more fragile than he had ever imagined. For the first time, Paul was forced to slow down, to sit still, to depend on others, and that reality unsettled him more than the injuries themselves. Megan became a constant presence during those days. She wasn't always there physically, but her influence lingered in every detail of his care. Other nurses passed through, doctors explained procedures, but it was Megan's voice he listened for, Megan's footsteps he recognized before he even saw her. She treated him with a rare balance of professionalism and warmth, never pitying him, never treating him like he was broken beyond repair. She spoke to him like a person, not a case. As Paul grew stronger, their conversations became longer. They spoke about small things at first, safe topics that didn't require vulnerability. Megan talked about her passion for nursing, about how she had chosen a career dedicated to helping others because she believed pain deserved compassion, not indifference. Paul listened intently, surprised by how calming her words felt. He found himself opening up without realizing it, sharing stories about his company, the pressure, the loneliness that success often hid behind polished smiles. Megan didn't seem impressed by his wealth or status. She didn't ask about numbers, investments, or fame. Instead, she asked how he was feeling, whether he was sleeping well, whether fear still visited him at night. That difference unsettled Paul in the most beautiful way. For years, people had admired what he had built. Megan cared about who he was when everything else was stripped away. There were nights when Paul woke up drenched in sweat, his heart racing, the memory of the attack replaying in his mind with brutal clarity. And on more than one of those nights, Megan was there. She sat beside his bed, grounding him, reminding him that he was safe now, that the moment had passed, that his future was still unwritten. Her calm presence soothed wounds no medication could reach. Slowly, Paul began to heal not just physically but emotionally. He started noticing the subtle details about Megan. The way she tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear when she was focused, the softness in her smile when she comforted patients, the quiet strength she carried without needing recognition. He admired her resilience, her dedication, her ability to give so much of herself to others without losing her kindness. As his discharge day approached, Paul felt an unexpected weight settle in his chest. The idea of leaving the hospital didn't bring relief alone. It brought fear. Fear of losing the connection that had become his anchor during recovery. He realized that Megan had become more than a nurse who saved his life. She had become the person who reminded him that vulnerability wasn't weakness, and that asking for help didn't diminish his worth. On the day he was finally cleared to leave, Paul thanked every member of the medical team, but when Megan stood in front of him, words failed. Gratitude didn't feel strong enough to describe what he felt. She smiled, wishing him well, encouraging him to rest, to take care of himself, to be patient with his healing. Her words were sincere, yet there was a quiet distance in her tone, as if she was carefully guarding her heart. As Paul walked out of the hospital, leaning slightly on his cane, he turned back one last time and saw Megan watching him go. In that brief exchange of glances, something unspoken passed between them. A connection neither of them were ready to name, yet both could feel deeply. Paul stepped outside into the sunlight, breathing fresh air for the first time in weeks. Life looked the same, but he knew he wasn't. The attack had taken something from him, but it had also given him something unexpected: clarity. He realized that surviving wasn't enough. He wanted to live differently, more honestly, more present, and with more courage than he had ever allowed himself before. And somewhere inside him, a quiet decision formed. He wouldn't let this connection fade into a memory. He didn't know how, and he didn't know if Megan would allow it, but he knew one thing with certainty. The woman who had stood by him at his lowest point was someone he couldn't walk away from without trying. What Paul didn't realize yet was that gratitude was only the beginning, and that the path ahead would test his patience, his intentions, and his heart in ways he never expected. Leaving the hospital did not mean leaving the fear behind. Paul returned to his apartment, surrounded by silence that felt heavier than any pain he had endured. The walls were clean, the furniture expensive, the view impressive, yet everything felt empty. For the first time in his life, success did not feel like protection. Felt like distance. Distance from meaning, from connection, from the simple warmth he had felt in Megan's presence. The nights were the hardest. Without the soft beeping of hospital machines or Megan's reassuring voice, the memories returned with force. The sound of footsteps behind him, the sudden blow, the helplessness of lying on the cold ground. Paul would wake up gasping for air, gripping the sheets, reminding himself he was safe. And every time, his thoughts drifted back to Megan, to the calm she brought, to the way she made him feel human again. Days passed, and Paul tried to distract himself with work. Meetings resumed, emails piled up, decisions demanded his attention. But something had changed. The ambition that once drove him relentlessly now felt hollow. Numbers no longer excited him the way they used to. He found himself questioning what all of it was for if he couldn't share his life with someone who truly saw him. Meanwhile, Megan returned to her routine at the hospital, pretending everything was normal. She smiled at patients, followed protocols, fulfilled her duties with the same dedication as always. Yet something inside her had shifted too. Paul lingered in her thoughts more than she cared to admit. She told herself it was natural, that caring deeply for a patient didn't mean more than that. Still, she missed their conversations, the quiet moments where words weren't necessary. Megan had learned long ago to protect her heart. Life had taught her that attachment could lead to disappointment, and she had built strong boundaries to survive. She believed her role was to help, to heal, and then to let go. But Paul had crossed a line she hadn't anticipated. He hadn't needed her strength. He had mirrored it, and that frightened her more than she wanted to admit. One afternoon, Paul stood outside the hospital, heart pounding, unsure if he should go in. He wasn't there as a patient this time. He was there as a man who had made a choice to face vulnerability instead of running from it. He took a deep breath and walked inside, feeling exposed, unsure, yet determined. When Megan saw him, surprise flashed across her face. For a brief moment, neither of them spoke. Time seemed to pause, memories rushing back in a wave neither could control. Paul broke the silence first, thanking her again, not just for saving his life, but for reminding him of it. His voice was calm, honest, without expectation. Megan listened, her heart racing despite her efforts to remain composed. She told him he didn't owe her anything, that she had only done her job. Paul smiled gently and told her that what she had given him went far beyond duty. He didn't ask for anything. He didn't push. He simply invited her for a coffee. No pressure, no promises, just two people talking. Megan hesitated. Every instinct told her to say no, to protect the boundaries she had worked so hard to maintain. But something in Paul's eyes stopped her. There was no arrogance, no entitlement, only sincerity. She agreed, surprising even herself. That coffee turned into hours of conversation. They talked about dreams, fears, childhood memories, and the moments that had shaped them. Paul spoke openly about how close he had come to losing everything, and Megan shared stories of patients who had changed her perspective on life. Laughter found its way between them, soft and unexpected. For the first time, Megan allowed herself to see Paul not as a patient, not as a wealthy businessman, but as a man who had been broken and was slowly rebuilding himself. And Paul saw Megan not just as the nurse who saved him, but as a woman with depth, resilience, and a heart capable of extraordinary compassion. As they parted ways that evening, there was no dramatic confession, no grand gesture, just a quiet understanding that something real had begun, something fragile yet powerful. Neither of them realized that this was only the beginning, and that the path ahead would require courage, patience, and the willingness to confront fears long buried. But for the first time since the attack, Paul felt hope rise within him, steady and warm. And Megan, walking home under the fading light, realized that some connections arrive not to disrupt your life, but to realign it with what truly matters. As the days went by, what began as a simple coffee slowly turned into something deeper, something neither Paul nor Megan had planned. They met again, and then again, always telling themselves it was casual, harmless, temporary. Yet every conversation lingered longer than the last. Every goodbye carried a silence filled with things left unsaid. Paul found himself smiling more, breathing easier, feeling alive in ways money had never given him. Megan noticed it too, how his eyes softened when he spoke, how his confidence no longer came from power but from vulnerability. She admired the way he listened, truly listened, as if every word she spoke mattered. Still, fear walked quietly between them. Megan knew the difference in their worlds could not be ignored. Paul was a successful businessman, surrounded by privilege and opportunity, while she lived a simple life shaped by long shifts and quiet sacrifices. She worried that she was just a chapter in his recovery, a reminder of a difficult moment he would eventually leave behind. Paul, on the other hand, feared pushing too hard. He had spent his life taking control, making bold moves, demanding results. But with Megan, he was careful. He didn't want to scare her away. He didn't want to turn something pure into something forced. One evening, as they walked through a park bathed in soft lights, Megan finally voiced what had been weighing on her heart. She asked him why he kept coming back, why he was choosing her when his life was filled with options. Paul stopped walking and looked at her with a seriousness that left no room for doubt. He told her that when he was lying on the cold pavement, bleeding and alone, he had realized how fragile everything was, that the life he had built, impressive as it looked, had been missing something essential, and that when Megan knelt beside him, calling for help, holding his hand, he felt seen not as a CEO, but as a human being who mattered. Megan's eyes filled with tears she tried to hide. She confessed that she had been afraid to let herself feel anything, afraid of hoping for something that might not last. Paul gently told her that he couldn't promise perfection, but he could promise honesty, effort, and respect. From that night on, their bond grew stronger. They supported each other through small victories and quiet struggles. Paul began volunteering, inspired by Megan's compassion, while Megan allowed herself to dream again, encouraged by Paul's belief in her. Yet life tested them once more. News spread about Paul's attack, and attention followed him again, pulling him back into a world of exposure and expectations. Megan watched from a distance, wondering if there was still space for her in that reality. Doubt crept back in, whispering that she didn't belong there. Sensing her distance, Paul confronted his fears and made a decision that surprised everyone around him. He stepped back from the spotlight, prioritizing what truly mattered. He showed Megan, not with words but with actions, that she was not an accessory to his life, but its center. Slowly, Megan allowed herself to believe, to trust, to love. And as they stood together one night, watching the city lights shimmer below them, both understood that love is not about saving someone, but about choosing each other every day, even when fear tries to stand in the way. They were no longer patient and nurse. They were two souls walking forward together, unaware that the greatest surprise of their journey was still waiting for them. As their relationship deepened, life began to reveal its true tests. Love, Paul was learning, was not only about moments of joy and connection, but about standing firm when uncertainty tried to shake everything apart. And uncertainty arrived quietly, disguised as responsibility. Paul's company faced a sudden crisis. A major investor pulled out, rumors spread, and pressure mounted from every direction. The same world that once applauded his success now questioned his decisions. Long days turned into sleepless nights, and the weight of leadership pressed heavily on his shoulders. Megan saw the exhaustion in his eyes, the tension in his voice, and the silence that followed him home. She didn't try to fix things or offer solutions. Instead, she offered presence. A warm meal after a long day, a gentle touch on his hand, a reminder that he didn't have to carry everything alone. For Paul, this support meant more than any business strategy ever could. He realized that real strength didn't come from control, but from allowing someone to stand beside you when you felt weak. At the same time, Megan faced her own internal struggle. Colleagues at the hospital whispered about her relationship with a wealthy businessman. Some admired her, others judged her. She felt the familiar sting of being misunderstood, of having her intentions questioned. It hurt more than she wanted to admit. One night, overwhelmed by doubt, Megan pulled away. She told Paul she wasn't sure if she belonged in his world, if loving him meant losing herself. Her voice trembled as she spoke, fear evident in every word. Paul listened quietly, his heart heavy but open. When she finished, he told her something that would change everything. He said that before the attack, his life had been full of people who admired his success but never truly cared for him, and that Megan was the first person who had loved him when he had nothing to offer but vulnerability. He told her that if she walked away, he would understand. But if she stayed, he would build a life with her where respect, equality, and love came first, not status or wealth. Megan cried openly then, releasing years of fear she had carried alone. In that moment, she realized that love wasn't about fitting into someone else's world, but about creating a new one together. As weeks passed, Paul stabilized his company, not by sacrificing his values, but by strengthening them. He learned to balance ambition with compassion, success with purpose. Megan watched him grow, proud of the man he was becoming. And then, on a quiet evening, Paul surprised her. No grand crowd, no flashing lights, no extravagance. Just the two of them, standing in a place where they had once talked for hours about dreams and fears. He told her that the worst night of his life had led him to the greatest gift he could ever imagine. He asked her to walk beside him not just through recovery, not just through love, but through a lifetime. Megan didn't hesitate. With tears in her eyes and a smile full of certainty, she said yes. Neither of them knew exactly what the future would look like, but they knew one thing without doubt. They had found something rare, something real, something worth fighting for. And as they held each other under the quiet sky, both understood that sometimes, life breaks you only to lead you to the love that was meant to heal you. The day of the wedding arrived quietly, without the noise of expectation or the weight of appearances. It was simple, intimate, and filled with meaning. For Paul, standing there waiting for Megan, it felt surreal to think that everything had begun on a cold night, in pain and fear, when he believed his life might end. As Megan walked toward him, there was no doubt in her eyes, only calm, certainty, and love. She wasn't walking toward a man of wealth or status, but toward someone who had learned how to be present, how to love, and how to heal alongside her. Their vows were not promises of perfection, but commitments to growth, honesty, and compassion. They spoke of choosing each other even when life became difficult, of remembering where they came from, and of never forgetting the night that brought them together. After the ceremony, Paul surprised everyone once more. He announced the creation of a foundation in Megan's name, dedicated to helping victims of violence and providing medical care to those who couldn't afford it. What stunned the room was not the size of the donation, but the reason behind it. Paul said that without a stranger's kindness, he wouldn't be standing there at all. Megan stood beside him, overwhelmed, realizing that love had not only changed her life, but had become a force capable of changing others. Together, they turned pain into purpose, fear into hope. Months passed, and their life settled into a rhythm built on respect and partnership. Paul no longer measured success by profit alone, but by impact. Megan continued her work as a nurse, now supported and encouraged, never overshadowed. One evening, as they walked through the same hospital corridor where everything had started, they stopped. Paul squeezed her hand and smiled, reminding her of the moment she had found him unconscious on the ground. Megan laughed softly and said that sometimes life doesn't warn you before it changes you forever. In that hallway, surrounded by quiet footsteps and distant voices, Paul realized the greatest truth of his journey. The attack that nearly ended his life had actually saved it, because it led him to love, to purpose, and to a future he never knew he needed. Megan understood something just as powerful. That courage doesn't always look like strength. Sometimes, it looks like kneeling beside a stranger and choosing to care, even when the world keeps moving past you. Together, they had built a story no one could take from them. A story where pain became the beginning, not the end. Where love didn't arrive perfectly, but arrived when it was needed most. And as they walked forward hand in hand, they carried one simple truth with them. Sometimes, the darkest moment of your life is only there to guide you toward the light you were always meant to find.